Hello, this is Angie Yingst, and you're listening to Centered, grounded conversations about the metaphysical. My conversation today is with Kristin Gallagher. Kristin is a licensed massage therapist and Reiki master who has been providing therapeutic massage and body work in central Pennsylvania since 2008. She owns a successful professional massage therapy practice called Intuitive Touch Body Spa. In addition to her massage career, Kristin is also a practicing pagan and identifies as an eclectic pagan witch. Her spiritual path began at the age of 13, which started with meditation and divination. These pagan traditions were passed down to her by her father, the late Harry Stevens. This opened the doorway to explore the magical arts. Over the last 19 years, she has dedicated herself to studying pagan traditions from all over the world. Enjoying nature, wild harvesting, and gardening, she is most drawn to the art of wart cunning, the knowledge of healing and magical properties of plants combined with the practical application of utilizing them. Where magic combines with science and practicality, Kristin creates many of her own herbal remedies, personal care products, and magical tools. After many years of taking classes and being mentored by others, she decided it was time to share her knowledge, and in 2019, Kristin decided to come out publicly as a pagan witch. To test the waters, she created a TikTok account, which quickly grew a large following by sharing her witchy mama lifestyle. So for those who don't know, TikTok is a social media platform for creating, sharing, and discovering short videos. One day, while I was watching TikTok, which is a little guilty pleasure of mine, I saw a post of Kristin's, which was beautiful aesthetically, smart, educational, cool. She was truly reaching out into the world and sharing her spirituality, connecting others with their own innate power, and educating others. I saw so many young witches inspired by her work, and I immediately texted her. And as you will hear, we've had a few conversations over the last year about some of what she faced after coming out of the broom closet and sharing her spiritual path. Since I met Kristin, I always saw her as a gifted teacher. She's just one of those people who legit hold space for others, and both on the massage table, but also in her spiritual path. We have sat in circle together, which is an incredibly intimate space to share of ourselves. And Kristin's always impressed me with her ability to listen and share authentically. Watching her TikTok account explode, watch her growing followers from all over the world has been just awesome to watch. She truly has been called to this path and teaching on this large scale. And she does it with humility and grace. And I'm just so happy that we got to sit down and talk about being a public witch. So Kristin is planning for her Witchy Mama project to expand, by the way, and she'll be launching an online store and YouTube channel in the autumn. Her YouTube is set up. She said she doesn't have many videos on there. It's called Witchy Mama, and Mama is spelled Mamma. You can find Kristin on TikTok at One Witchy Mama or Instagram at witchy.mama. And I hope you enjoy my conversation with Kristin Gallagher. It's like kind of hard to know like where to start, but I think like the first thing that I've always wanted to ask you about, and we've been friends for a while and I've never asked you, is you have told me that you got your spirituality from your father, like your dad was a practicing witch. So maybe could you tell me a little bit about that? Like, was your mom a practicing witch? Like tell me about your home. Like what was
Yeah. So that's a great question. I grew up in a very open home as far as spirituality and religion goes.
Mm-hmm.
My dad identified as a pagan, and my mom, my stepmom, identified as a Catholic, but she was very psychic and connect with spirits. So It was always just very open. I wouldn't say I necessarily grew up in a pagan home or a witch home, but I did grow up in a home that was like very into spirituality and embracing the individuality of your path. And that is something that always has stuck with me, as my dad always made sure to tell me that it's your choice, and he never wanted me to feel pressured. So I kind of did my own thing, and it wasn't until I was about 12 and 13 when I started kind of being more curious about his beliefs. So yeah, that's kind of where it it started. And I don't know, it was almost like a light went off when I started getting into my dad's practices, which were based around meditation and working with the earth and just being present. So it wasn't really anything super witchy when I first started. It was very natural. It felt like it was coming home in a way.
And that's, I mean, that's kind of the funny thing about this path of, you know, I consider myself like earth-based or pagan, is that it is very natural. 99% of it is just doing things connected to the earth and being a good steward of the earth and meditating and taking good care of yourself. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not what people usually imagine, which is like conjuring and
yeah, and that's the thing with the words like witches and pagan, that has like so much negative connotation around it. And so my dad never actually identified as a witch. He called me a witch because that's how I saw myself.
Yeah.
But he identified as just a spiritual being and followed more of like a druid path. So
cool.
The Celtic druid path, but he was very eclectic at the same time. Like I think my first experience with my dad was when he showed me his form of divination, which was I Ching. You know I Ching? And that was fascinating to me. And he was practicing I Ching divination since like the 70s, and he did it until he passed. So it was like, oh wow, it's not just one area. This is like so many different areas. And that's what really made me passionate about learning, is because it's not just one thing. It's just like so many different cultures and so many different aspects of, I guess, a magical practice, an earth-based practice, that it connects us all in a sense.
Oh yeah. And I mean, you consider yourself an eclectic pagan witch, right? So that kind of like fits very nicely with that, where you're kind of bringing in from different traditions, right? Is that
yes, always respectfully, though. I try my best not to cultural appropriate, and if I am taking something, another belief system, I make sure I always follow in the footsteps of someone from that practice or from that belief system. So I do try to do it respectfully, but I knew that coming out as an eclectic pagan witch was going to offend a lot of people, because people call eclectic witches cherry pickers. They see us as we're just picking what we like and not giving any respect to where those practices are coming from. So I try to make sure that I'm doing my research and pulling from the right things with respect. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because I'm like, I kind of was like, oh geez, I do that all the time. I don't know if I should say terrible about it. I just think like when I hear the truth, it's hard to say like this belongs somewhere. You know, I obviously would never say, oh, this Chinese belief is now Mayan, and pretend like I'm Chinese or that I was somehow given it. But there are times when I'm taught things and I'm like, there's so much truth in that.
Exactly. Yes. And that's why I choose that label, I guess, of eclectic pagan witch, because yeah, it is that. It's doing it in a respectful way, though.
Yeah. So. And when you talk about divination too, like, what did you find that when you were like 12, 13, was that kind of something that you were pursuing at that time, or was it more like, oh, what are you doing with those coins? Like, what are you?
Yeah. I would say divination was the first thing that sparked my interest in pursuing this path, because I was like, wow, like I always saw it as like a Hollywood thing. It was, and then when I realized that it was so simple and it was more about intuition, because I was like, wow, I know sometimes I feel things that happen before they happen, or sometimes I get a weird vibe when someone comes into the room. So as like a 10 or 11-year-old child, and you're like, wait a minute, those feelings, those feelings of intuition or being empathic can actually benefit me or others by focusing it on something like divination. So yeah, divination was my first, I would say it was the first thing I started with, but that's not where I ended up. It was the gateway.
What was the first divination technique that you picked up?
I did start with bones, like bone throwing, and matches.
Kristin, that's amazing.
And matches. I do match divination, and I don't see anybody else that really does it, but it's very intuitive. There is a chart that I follow but most of the time it's intuitive, and it's where I just take matches and I light them. Sometimes I'll have the person play with them so their energy's on them, and then I throw them down on a cloth or throw them in some water, and it either makes an image or creates some type of energy that makes me see or feel something, and I'm able to read it that way. So I've been doing match divination since I was like 12, but it was not something I shared with a lot of people because it's weird. Like, people are expecting tarot cards and pendulums and things that are more classic, but I like the things that are almost like around your home, because magic and witchcraft and all that, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be this complex thing. It can be really simple. So I think that's where I started. But then tarot, of course, it's almost like you have to get into tarot for a little bit to
it winds its way in.
Yeah.
And
And
so fascinated by the match throwing and the bone. I had a bone reading with someone, and I said, "Oh, when did you start reading bones? Like, how did you learn how to read bones?" She goes, "Honey, I can read anything." And I was like, exactly. That captured what I feel like all of our paths should be, which is like, whatever you bring me, I will connect with spirit with it, and I can help, I can read it.
yes.
So with tarot, were you that young when you found tarot too?
No, I was probably in high school by the time I started getting into tarot, because I did struggle with some like dyslexia. So reading tarot was like, I was like, I couldn't focus on the cards. There was so much information for each card. So by the time I was in high school, I did develop my own studying skills.
Yeah.
Flashcards, as silly as it is to make flashcards for tarot cards.
No, that's not silly. Oh my God, that's so smart.
But that helped me. That's really what helped me understand the cards, and then follow my intuition more. Like, and tarot was not something that I continued through in my practice. It was something I wanted to learn so I could understand it. But I don't read tarot now. I could if I wanted to, but I prefer to get readings from you or somebody else when it comes to tarot.
It's funny, like, that's the cool thing is, like, you're connected with other people. So, like, I'd love to have a match reading from you. It's just like, whatever gifts that person has to bring, it just seems like, I want that thing that you do, So did you connect with other baby witches when you were a teenager?
I was, and this is my favorite part of my journey, is because I'm still very close friends with these women.
Really?
Yeah,
That's great.
it's wild. Like, I want to say it was more in high school when I started practicing with other people. And my 3 really close friends today, like, we started, we're like, hey, I invited them over, like, hey, do you guys want to celebrate Beltane? And they're like, what's that? And
that's so cool. I knew that I mean, you've talked to me. You're like, oh yeah, I connect with these women on all the major Sabbats, but I didn't realize that started in high school. That is so cool.
It did. It started in high school, and we would practice rituals and ceremonies for the holidays, and I kind of tethered them in. I kind of, like, I don't want to say I tricked them into it, but I was like, hey, this is really cool. I'm into this. If you guys want to try it. And we started doing it regularly then. Like, every year we would do Yule, we would do Beltane, we would celebrate different milestones for each other. And we're still friends now. So it's weird to think that it's been over a decade that we started as baby witches, and now we're like women.
Yeah.
Teaching baby witches. So.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's the other part. It's funny. First thing I want to say is, I've heard only pretty much nightmare stories of people with covens, of people that connect with other witches. Like, oh, it's horrible. The coven, we're all backstabbing and doing spells. And I'm just like, really? Is that what a coven is? Like, the people I went exploring with when I was a teenager, I'm still friends with everyone. I don't think they're practicing on the path. I thought it was fun. I think they did too, but it was kind of like the result of being goth teenagers.
Right. And I do think that a lot of people start their journey in that age, because you're coming into yourself, your hormones are all weird, and it's like a way of expressing yourself. So I want to say like probably more than half of the people that start this journey as teenagers or baby witches, which I don't like the term baby witches, but baby witches.
That's what they call them on
That's
TikTok. So
yeah, that's what. Yeah, I'm fine if that's what they want to be called. But,
yeah, I know.
but yeah, the beginning witches. It's like not all of them stay on the path because it's almost like they want to try it out, see what it's like, and if it doesn't serve them, they move on. But they always
Yeah.
have that memory of how they're like, oh yeah, I used to play around with tarot cards, or I used to do seance, or I played around with the Ouija board, or it's interesting. And I do see that a lot on social media. It's like some people dabble in it, and then some people it is a part of your life, or your business, or it is you, a part of you. So
I think it's been really hard for me because I so associated it with that time, and I felt like I was the only one who was really still doing it, that I was a little embarrassed to come out and say I was a tarot reader and that I was a psychic and that I was a pagan, because I was like, this is what teenagers do. Like,
right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I didn't have a model for an adult woman doing this work. So I just kind of hid it away. And, when I actually came out, it was a little weird, So I felt really uncomfortable about it because I felt like it showed my immaturity or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
I can really relate to that. I want to say like I kept my practice pretty private, like for a long time, like up until pretty recently.
Yeah.
And I only shared my beliefs with like, the people within my community. So the people that I celebrated ceremonies with and rituals with and the holidays with. And of course, people that I would take workshops with and classes with, they would have an understanding of, kind of where my beliefs were. Yeah. But I never really like stood up and said like, this is who I am and I'm proud, because I was kind of embarrassed, like you said, and I didn't want to offend anyone. And I didn't want to be, most of all, I didn't want to be judged harshly because, again, like I said, the words pagan or witch or psychic, they have these negative connotations, or they have these Hollywood expectations. And I think it was towards the end of your psychic development classes that I realized like, wow, I actually have a lot to offer. And if I'm putting myself in this box and not sharing this, like I'm dampening my potential. And that was like the aha moment of how do I come out as what do I do? And so that's when I decided I'm just going to publicly say like, this is who I am and not give two F's about it. Yeah. Because I know there's going to be people, younger beginning witches or pagans or people that want to start a different journey that's not traditional. And I want to help them and know that they're not alone. And it's okay. Like you don't have to be afraid. It's our time now to be like, this is who I am. So, but it's scary because people look at you funny when you say these things, especially if they don't take the time to look and research and understand that this is stuff that's been practiced for the beginning of time. So I totally relate with that, with what you said of, being judged or feeling like, immature about it. But I think if you put on this very strong, powerful approach and say, no, this is who I am, I don't really give about what you say, then the people that hear that need to hear that are going to get that message.
Absolutely. I think it's really important what you just said, because I don't know where it comes from. And I don't know, maybe we could talk about that a little, but I kind of have an innate fear of being pagan or witchy or earth-based, or not being Christian. And I was raised Catholic, so we're like low-key witches to begin with, like all the stuff we do. But I mean, to kind of move that out into the world. I'm a mom. I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about that because you're a mom too, and that's within the last few years. So like, what happens with that? Like, I don't want those kids' moms to go like, oh, you're not going to the witch house.
Exactly.
That's scary. And then we have, you're a body worker. I'm also someone who works on the body, and my clients, they're still in central Pennsylvania. I mean, a lot of them ask me questions about whether what they're doing is aligned with their Christian values. So it's not like we're so far afield from that where we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe in a big city, it would be different. I mean, what do you think about that? Do you think it's because of where we are in some ways?
Yeah, I do. It's weird because I've watched this area kind of grow spiritually, and I know you have too. Like,
Yeah.
I think we've come a long way
Mhm.
as acceptance and stuff like that. And there's a lot more people expressing themselves through spirituality, and not necessarily calling themselves witches or pagans, but like what you guys do at Altaview, you don't have to be any of those things to practice those things.
Right. Right.
You don't have to be giving yourself a label. But with this area being still fairly conservative and a very large Christian and Jewish community. But I do feel that like sometimes I have to, as far as my massage business goes and my body working business goes, I do have to put a line between where religion and spirituality meet.
Yes.
And that is hard when you're trying to work with clients and they're unsure. So usually what I do is I just give them tools to do the research on their own. So one of the websites I really like recommending is sacredtext.com or .org, one of the two. And that way they can do their research and make a decision on their own if it feels right to their Christian values. Because I actually did start out Christianity as well, even though my household was not a church going household. My dad was not a big fan of organized religion or going to church, even though my mom is Catholic. But that did not stop me from going to church with friends or other families and exploring that avenue. I did explore that avenue up until I turned about 12, 13. And my dad always said, I'm glad you're exploring that and experiencing that, because that's going to give you foundation of what you believe. And if I didn't experience that part of Christianity in my life, I would not have the values I have in my practice now, as far as pagan goes.
Yeah.
But there's so many similarities, and I don't think Christians realize that they're doing magical shit from pagans all the time. So that's
every holiday, pretty much.
Yeah, every holiday, blowing out your birthday candles and all those things are pagan traditions. So that's why I like to give them the tools to do the research. And when they find that out, they're like, hey, it is okay if I go do yoga or get my chakras aligned or, go to a ceremony and still be a Christian. So I know that's a really sensitive subject with a lot of people, though. Not everyone's going to agree with what I said.
No, and I mean, but it's hard because I don't think in most places, and I have my degree in comparative religion, so we talk a lot about like the ideal versus the real.
Yes.
And in many places, people have naturally mixed their folk religion, the religion of the people that happened pre-Christian or pre-Muslim or whatever came in to preach. Buddhism is also a religion that spreads, that's evangelical. So like pre-Buddhist, pre-Christian, pre-Muslim, there are folk, connected to the land, connected to the gods of the land, connected to the ancestors. You see that a lot in Japan too. But they naturally mix it all together. So you can't take the folk practice out of the religion. But when you study it all cut up like that, and that's what the United States did,
Yeah.
People brought their religion. They're like, okay, I'm leaving those old practices. I don't know. The Pilgrims messed up a lot.
Oh, gosh. They really did. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. But yeah, that's really true. You'll see, there's so many traditions in Christian, Jewish, Muslim that are really old pagan traditions or constructs like the jinn or genie. Right. Still, Muslims, they even though they're very religious and they're like anti-magical shit, they still believe in genies and the jinn, and that's because that was intertwined when the beginning of their religion was created. So that pagan roots are still filtered through their practices today, and that's like with almost anything. So yeah,
and I think it's most evident kind of in the Celtic Northern European, where the Catholics are like, you believe in that goddess? Okay, she's a saint now.
Oh, Bridget, oh gosh, I could go on we're going to stop there because I will go on a whole entire hour about that.
Oh,
But yes, that is true. The Celtic people could not give up their goddess, and they
nor
made
should
her
they. Nor should they. I mean, I kind of like that about Catholicism. I just wish Catholicism would acknowledge it, you know?
Oh, I really find it fascinating that they haven't acknowledged it yet because there's so much.
Yeah.
There's so much.
So before you came out, did you feel at peace with your spirituality, or has coming out been the part that made some more peace? Like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I guess I would say before coming out to the public,
Yeah.
I felt alone. Even though I had people that I practiced with, and of course I had you guys in the psychic development class,
Yeah.
and other classes that I've taken, and the mentors that I've met over the years, I wasn't really alone. I have all of you, but I did feel alone because I had all this information in my head, all of this information in my head that has just been circling in my head or in my journals for years. And I'm like, is this benefiting anyone besides me if I'm just keeping this all here? So I felt really alone. I felt insecure about my beliefs. I was like kind of doubting them a little bit. And I think coming out publicly and saying that I am an eclectic pagan witch, I was like, wow, okay, now it's time to share my shit and see what happens. And as soon as I started sharing some of my experiences or some of my, recipes or spell work, and the response I was getting from people that I do not know, I have never met in my life, was like astronomical. That's the only word I can think of. I was not expecting that response. So it was like going from a dark room straight on to like the rays of the sun. It was like the light was on, and I kind of felt bad that I didn't do it sooner because it was almost like I was wasting time. So I feel like I'm backtracking now. So it was very emotional, and I still is emotional because there's shadow work involved with, coming out and just being public and telling your story or your spell work, which is actually really, really private.
It's so personal.
It's very personal. And I really was not sure about sharing my stuff online at all because of how much the media is over flooded with spirituality, and it's almost fake. And it was like, I don't want to be perceived as somebody that's just getting on here showing all this witchy aesthetic stuff to be accused of not being true, because this is like 20 years of hard work, and then to be said like, oh no, she's not real, she's making it up.
Yeah.
So that's where like a lot of the shadow work came in, and I'm glad though. At the same time, I'm really glad.
It was so exciting for me. Can I tell the story of what happened?
Yes.
So my daughter's on TikTok, and I have TikTok on my phone so I can spy on her and make sure she's appropriate because she's 13. And this was when she was like 11 or 12. And I'm like looking through TikTok, and your video popped up, and I was like, holy shit, Kristin has 3,000 likes on this. And then I went in and you had like hundreds of comments, and I was like, does she realize she's TikTok famous? Oh my gosh. I was like, I immediately texted you. I was like, oh my gosh, you're on TikTok. I was so excited because you were honestly, I mean, I guess I had followed a couple people popped up because I maybe did 1 or 2 videos with crystals, and I didn't really get on like anybody follow me, but because I did that, other crystal people popped up, and then you popped up. And I know this sounds kind of funny, but you were like one of the first, if not the first, witch talk kind of witchy person I saw on there.
Oh, wow.
I know there was probably more there already, but once I started seeing your stuff, I was like, wow, there's so many witches on here. I didn't even know this was a thing. And the content was so amazing. I was so excited for you.
Oh,
just because,
thank you.
Like you've brought up the psychic development circle a few times. And one of the things, like, you were in this circle, but you knew, like, you could have been teaching what I was doing. Like, you're so knowledgeable and you've done so much research. And I know TikToks and Instagrams, they're like small snippets, but like your knowledge is so vast, and
Oh, thank you so
I've
much.
so valued having you in circle because you always add this incredible new perspective. You always have done research in like maybe like a little bit of a different area that you always can add in. Like I've just always felt like you could be teaching this class, you know. I love
Oh,
you so much.
oh, I love you so much. That
I'm
means
like
so
your
much to
biggest
me.
fan. I was like, yay!
Oh,
And then, you know, I kind of, I have to say, got a little afraid for you too, because I'm like,
yes.
this is a lot of young people here.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, we can talk about that. But
Oh, well, I
yeah,
love you so much. And that means so much what you said, because I wasn't in those classes I was there for the info, but I was more there for the group.
connection.
Yeah. And learning from each other, because I feel like I learn better when I get someone else's perspective. So
Mhm.
hearing other people's stories and just being around their energy, it's like, I might have already knew that information, but I would leave coming out with something else
Yeah.
that connected to that information that I already knew, that I had a new, you know, I don't know, new perspective. And I thank you so much for that, because I would not have come out if it wasn't for
Yeah.
the psychic development series.
It was such, I mean, that circle was an interesting one because like we started with a lot of people and we ended up with a really small group.
Yeah.
And then, so the second level, you were with men.
Mm-hmm.
That to me was one of the most powerful circles. I
Yes.
loved that level 2 circle because it was like half men, half women. Was it more men than women in it?
I think it started out as almost the same amount of men and women, and then towards the end it was more men than women, but I loved that energy
So
because
good.
we have that we have different perspectives, and I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was really powerful. So let's talk about that. Like when you went and were immediately blowing up, did you feel like I have to have more content? Like what did it change your perspective, or like how do I start small? Like, where do you even start with that? I mean, I've
Yeah.
honestly been in this place where my daughter's like, you should make TikToks about what you do. Like I'm like doing altars and stuff. She's like, there's so much on witch talk that you could do here. And I just like, I just don't know what to start with. And
Right.
that's my, I don't know. It just I haven't felt called to it. So, I mean, and I'm not sure I'm ever going to. I'm 46. Like, there's a point where it's like, okay, you're one of those weird people on TikTok. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes, so it was like I actually got on TikTok kind of as an experiment slash joke, because I saw a bunch of people saying, "Oh, there's this new platform. There's a bunch of spiritual people on here," and I was like, "Okay, let me check it out." And I think the first video I did that really blew up was I made cleansing spray.
Mhm.
And like instead of using smoke, you
Yeah.
use a cleansing spray or something like that. I think that was
Probably
maybe my
something
first.
I think you talked about in our circle because you couldn't really burn, right? Yeah.
Yes, I did. I think I brought that to Circle a few times. So I was not expecting that video or any of my videos to really get traffic or views or likes or comments or anything like that. I wasn't trying. I was just kind of sharing some of the stuff that I do. And then once it started to build quickly, I was like, oh shit. Ooh. Like I need to start putting up protection for myself. I need to start warding. I need to start, kicking minors off my page. And, I started to be like, oh man, like this is a thing. And
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that. So everything that I do share, if it's spell work, it's either demonstrational spell work or it's past tense, meaning that the spell has already come to fruition and it's
Right.
okay to share that online. So, but everything that I share is for me too. I'm sharing it because I enjoy it, and I like the videography and the aesthetic of.
Yeah, you just
you
have
know,
a great mix there.
oh, thank you. And I really enjoy I enjoy watching them afterwards. Well, not the ones where I'm talking, but I don't know how it happened. It just happened. And then once it did start to build and I was like, okay, people want more. So that's when I started developing more content. But at the same time, I then was getting reported, and then I was shadow banned on my original account, which is Witchy Mama.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm done. I'm done with TikTok. I'm pissed because they took my
what does
shadow ban
mean?
okay, so shadow ban can happen on any platform, but it's really popular on TikTok. And what it is that they use the algorithm and they take you off of the algorithm or change the algorithm, so your content is not gonna show up on anybody's feed. So it's not gonna show up on the For You page or the following page. Sometimes you can't comment. There's a lot of times that it'll just say this video is removed, even though on my screen it'll say it's still there. So it's their way of blocking people from seeing your content. And this can happen most often when people are reporting you. And I had someone that did not like what I was sharing. This happened to be another practitioner, and she still continues to mess with me. But she didn't like what I was sharing because we've been in classes and workshops together before. And I know it stemmed from jealousy and envy. So my original account was like kind of banned, and it's still there, but I can't really make content on it because it gets deleted right away. Can't go live and all that, blah, 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 blah. So I created another account after a long, long month off. And that was what I use now. And that's One Witchy Mama. And I don't know, I think I have 3.4 million likes right now and almost 170,000 followers. And I don't know how. I don't know.
I have theories. I think it's because you're very authentic, and what you do, you do. You're not just creating content to create content. I mean, that's the part. Like, I've saved a lot of your videos because they're just like little tips and techniques that I'm like, oh, that's such a good idea. I have never thought of that before. And like saved it so I can do it later. Or, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like your sour jar I kept because I was like, oh, she has such a different way of doing it. I love that.
Yes.
The way I was taught was not pleasant, but I like the way you did it. It was just, I mean, I really wanted to ask you about this part, like positive and negatives of being a public witch, because I've had, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, I've had a lot of issues when I went public of just jealousy and, you know, people just kind of like focusing on me, even though I don't really know them and I don't know anything about them. I don't know, maybe you can talk a little bit about that in your life.
Yeah. So that was something I didn't really think of until I started gathering a larger following.
Yeah.
And I think I contacted you. I did contact you. I contacted you and another one of my mentors, and then I got a reading also from another person that I never met before, because I wanted to check all my boxes.
Yeah.
But I did get psychically attacked by this person that I do know in person, and I've taken workshops with them before. Okay. And they found my content on TikTok and didn't like it. And this is the first and only time that I had someone actually successfully curse or hex me.
Yeah.
And it was physical. It manifested into physical, which I think I texted you, like I was getting literal pinpricks on areas that I can't reach on my back, perfect blood, you know, like if you got picked by a needle on my back, weird marks and scratches, bruising, incredibly strange dreams, and then just pain and tired and achy. And I went to the doctor, I got a physical. I mean, I made sure I did all of the practical things first, you know, I made sure everything was right physically. And then I was like, wait a minute, I definitely feel like I'm being attacked. And this is what you have to think about when you're going public, is not just that, are you going to offend people, or are you going to feel embarrassed because you are practicing magic? It's more like, am I going to now be vulnerable to, it could be bullying, like actual bullying, or spiritual attacks and psychic attacks. And that was really scary for me because I've never had that really happen to me before. I've had backlash from the magical workings I've done, but that's from myself. That's my own damn fault. But yeah, I contacted you. I was like, what do I do? And you were like, you know, do an egg cleanse, and I did that, and I did several days of ritual bathing and anointing. I warded my home. I did all this stuff, and then I got a reading with you, which you did not want me to pay for, but I refused to let you do it for free because there was a purpose. There was a reason I was getting the reading, and I feel like even though the energy exchange, I would consider us friends,
Yes.
but the energy exchange, I was going through something, and I knew that there was something that I had to pay you for that service. And I contacted my other mentor, and she was like, yeah, you need to retaliate. And I was like, what?
That
Like, I
feels
don't,
so weird when someone says that, but it is so important.
yeah, I was not ready for that, because even though I am eclectic and I do fit in the gray area of magic, I wasn't really like, oh yeah, I'm gonna throw this back to sender. And when it continued on for several more weeks, I realized, okay, yes, I have to do something now. And it confirmed with someone that I do not know, that I got a reading from, that I've never got a reading from, and they even picked up on it. So I was like, okay, I'm not making this up. This is not outside influence of my mentors, just, sometimes if you're, yeah, being protective. This is a real thing. So yeah, that's what you got to watch out for when you're in the public eye then.
It's a weird thing. It's weird because you kind of that's I think when I started doing this work more publicly, the first thing I was worried about was like, is everybody going to judge me? Is this going to be like uncomfortable, blah 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 blah. But then that was the easy part. It was actually people were like, oh, I knew that about you. I could sense that, The other part, the being focused on, can be a hard one because did that person contact you and tell you they didn't like your content?
Yes, they originally contacted me and said, I really don't think you should be sharing this. Basically accusing me of sharing my path to gain internet clout.
Right.
And if this person actually knew me and paid attention to my Instagram, is that I will go months without posting something. I think I have only 200 posts on my Instagram, and I've been on there since 2014. I've never done anything for internet clout. I haven't been on Facebook in like 6 months. So I was like, really? Like, why do you think that I'm using TikTok, another platform, to gain clout? It just so happened that I did gain a following, but I didn't do it for that. And in that conversation, I basically said it that way, like, no, you're wrong. I'm not doing this for clout. I'm sharing my path because I think it's going to help others. And I want to shine a light on this type of work to show that it's not about Hollywood spells and magical powers, and that magic is in everything, and it's in us, and it's in the earth, and it's all around us. And that's what I wanted to showcase. And so when I said that to her, that just fueled her fire more. And I think that's why she was successful in harming me, because she was so passionate about hating me. And that raw energy of just really not liking me or being jealous and envious just fueled her magical workings. So, and then when she found out that I knew what she did, that's when she had attempted again, which was a few months ago. And I so far have been able to block her because people are helping me find her content or find her page. I'll block her, and I don't think she can see any of my stuff anymore unless she makes another account. But that's pretty much how it went down.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I know it just feels so emotional to share that. I mean, I kind of shared my experience with that a few years ago, where someone just focused on me, and it sent me into the hospital, and I had 4 esophageal ulcers, and when they looked at the picture, they looked like someone had burned 4 holes in my throat.
Wow.
And the doctor said, I think you got a pill stuck. I was like, in 4 places? Like, what are you talking about? I mean, I didn't say to him, I think I'm being psychically attacked, but it was so clear. It was just like burn marks,
Right.
It was, and I mean, that's like the tip of the iceberg of what happened. But just to realize, like, I kind of can be a little Pollyanna-ish about my, I'm not harming anyone, no one's going to harm me, and it's all okay. And after that, that was in 2018, I am like unrelenting with my protection work. And I've
Yes.
gotten a couple books that have been very, very helpful that I use, and then other stuff that I've picked up. So, because one of the things I love about your content is that you're just so suited to teach. And I think it comes through your content where it's not condescending. Like you said, you don't really like that term baby witch. So it's not like you're kind of condescending to people, that's kind of a condescension. But, like you just show them what you do, and you show all the aspects. Like the things I love, the ones that I really bookmark are like when you're in the forest harvesting wild herbs and
Oh,
you're, connected with the earth, because that's so important for this path. It's
yeah.
not all about the fancy big spells that we do, which are really awesome and cool. But like the daily magical practice that we have is having like a really good relationship with the earth. And
Oh, yes.
that's so clear in your content.
Oh, thank you. And that's, there's the more aesthetically pleasing videos, but those are my favorites too. Those are my favorites because that's what I'm most passionate about is wild crafting and collecting from the earth and harvesting from the earth. I've been a gardener for almost as long as I've been a practicing pagan. I started that too as a preteen. And I think connecting with the earth and she has so much for us. Like people are like, where do you get your supplies? I'm like, most of my supplies come from outside. Like I just go outside. Like it's not that complicated. I'm sure if there's like herbs and stuff that I can't get that are from other places, we'll get them from Mountain Rose Herbs or from sellers on Etsy and stuff like that. But yeah, like my craft is about connecting with the earth and all that it has to offer. And like so many people don't realize like there's magical tools in your backyard. There's magical tools in your kitchen cabinet right now. Like it doesn't have to be fancy dancy stuff. I mean, I love crystals and all, but it doesn't have, you can find beautiful stuff outside, it doesn't have to be so complicated. And that aspect, the wild crafting, the wort cunning, I would say that's my main focus, even though that's not where I started in my craft. I started with divination, but as I went on, realizing all of the medicinal properties and all of the magical properties and how we can heal ourselves and how our ancestors used the plants and the magic, or the indigenous people that use the earth, and when things were taken from them, they utilized what they had. So I feel like there's so much more power in that than like going to a metaphysical shop, even though I love metaphysical shops, than going to a metaphysical shop and buying a bunch of herbs there. Like,
I 100% agree. It's like, if you can go outside and, pick what's growing in your backyard as a chacapa, then sending to Peru to get like the plants from Peru, like what would be the point of that? That's not even indigenous to you. There's so many things, like little threads I want to pick up on. One of the things that, when you're talking about wild harvesting and using what you have and you're not wanting to culturally appropriate, that all feels like the same conversation too,
Yes.
So when you're kind of going back to your ancestral root, do you think of it as Druid because your father was kind of on the Druid path, or?
Yes, this is a great question. And it's something that has been very much a part of my path because it was my father's passion. His genealogy and, ancestor work was very important to him. So he comes from Celtic ancestry and did consider himself a Druid. He was a craftsman. So he was a builder of all sorts of things, furniture, tools, clothing, jewelry. I mean, so many different things, but that was only one side. So I've always been connected to the Celtic path. Fairies, I did not want to bring them up today. I told them I wouldn't, but fairies have always been a part of my path and they've always been a part of my life. Yeah. So yes, that is a part of it. But my other side of my family, my biological mother's side, my grandfather and grandmother are 100% Norwegian. My grandfather is 100% Norwegian. My grandmother is Swedish and Norwegian. So I have the Norse aspect as well.
Wow.
And this was really hard for me learning that I was both, because if you learn about history, the Norse people, came to Ireland and was like, hey, this place is cool. Like, I'm going to take over. Like, let's kill some people and try to make this our own. And so that history for me is kind of like, I don't know, there's some wounds there, because on one side of my family, I have the Celtic people. And then on the other side, I have the Norse. And, that history is like, ooh, how do I come to terms with being both? Can I practice aspects of both paths without dishonoring my ancestors from one family? So I'm still working on that. Because I can't call myself a Celtic witch, and I can't call myself a Norse witch, because I pull from both. And that's why I always say eclectic pagan witch.
I think it's hard. I mean, for me, I'm in an interesting similar position that my mother's Central American and my dad's like full Irish. So like I have both the colonized and the colonizer. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's like a weird thing to make peace with, because out in the world I present as a woman of color, but I'm also like half white.
Yes.
And I was raised with a really strong Irish identity. Like my grandfather's uncle was the last Molly Maguire hung in Pennsylvania. So we have this like really strong connection with the Molly Maguires and with the Irish identity in the United States. But that's not how people see me. Like I am seen as Central American. And my mother, because I'm so close to my mother, she passed her, low-key witchy stuff to us. You know what I mean? So I have a lot of Central American understanding of that. Whereas the Irish part was all Catholic. There wasn't as much spiritual work done in that way. But I've been really struggling with this, and trying to identify like being both having wounded ancestry and also being the wounder, and then reading more about trauma.
Oh yes, I mean, and that has to be hard. To have both the colonizer and I mean, I feel emotional with that, because your ancestry, like that, even though it's not like you can't see it, it's in your DNA. So that pain and that memory is within you.
Absolutely.
And that's like, oh, like how do you heal that? That's something I really am interested in getting into, is that healing on that DNA level, on that ancestral level. I haven't researched too much about it. I wasn't sure if you knew much about it, but with everything that's going on right now in the world, I think something like that, and spreading information about how to heal that DNA on the DNA level, that ancestral level, the past lives even, I think that would help a lot of people. So my goal is to study that for a little bit, learn more about that, and share that on the platforms that I can, because like what you just said, that's what we need, is more of that healing.
Yeah. And epigenetics is a big deal too, like studying how the wounds of ancestors do change the DNA. I haven't read as much as I'd love to read about it. My mentor was very, very interested in that work. But I know that when I work on people, I get a lot about ancestral healing happening. That people are breaking, not curses. I don't like to use that word curse, but like breaking ancestral wounds. Get passed on, and they feel like curses because it's, kind of like being bit by a werewolf. Like if I see trauma and abuse, then I'm going to do it. And it doesn't really work that way. It's that's all and that's what you pass on. But when it changes the DNA, then how do you go in and heal the DNA there? To me, that's the key, right? Like first we have to, as my teacher always says, first you have to name it to tame it. Like you have to know what you're doing. You don't just go and like, oh, I just want to heal and everything's fine, because that's spiritual bypassing. And to me, that's one of my biggest pet peeves in our community.
Oh yes, that's for sure, hands down, my biggest pet peeve, the toxic positivity and the bypassing shit that you need to actually uncover. And that's what I love about your work so much, and in this psychic development with the shamanic journey. And we go in and we have the animal come and eat parts of us, and like someone from the outside hearing that would be like, what the hell are they talking about? Like, this is crazy. But that's what you need. Sometimes what seems to be, gruesome or harsh is the way you get to the real root of what you're trying to get at or what you're trying to heal. And healing and magic and all that stuff, when you intertwine it, you can't do the work without getting through the shit. You have to go through that heavy stuff to actually get to the meat of it all. And I can't stand that toxic positivity, because that's how I was. I was like that when I started my path. My first mentor ever, besides my father, was a woman named Candy, and she's a psychic medium. And she had workshops for young people, and it was all about love and light, enduring virtue and peace and hearts. And I thought that that was the goal, and that you had to be like that in order to ascend higher in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that, all it did for me was just shut me down emotionally and psychologically. And I had a lot of issues because I was like, oh, no, got to push that down. You can't feel that way. Like,
Yeah.
you have to, that's not spiritual. That's not, magical. And I was so wrong, because that, it hit me later on when I reached high school, like, wow, that is toxic, pretending and putting on this face. And that's just like a mask. And it is not, I think it's worse than the opposite.
I completely agree. That's why I love that you call yourself a gray witch, because there's this whole idea that, like, we want to apologize. Like, I call myself a bruja, but when we call ourselves witches, we have to clarify. Oh, I'm
Right.
Glenda. I'm not the wicked witch. I'm the good witch, not the bad witch. And the truth is, like, the grayness is so important to kind of explain and announce. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, but just acknowledging that there's both light and dark seems so valuable to me, because our community is rife with this idea that darkness does not exist with light. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? It needs to be in balance. If you have all light, you will literally burn yourself. You will literally burn up in flames, so.
Yes. Oh, yes. That is,
This is Ash.
yeah, exactly. Duality is core in my belief system. Duality, I see it in almost everything, and is very important to me because of my journey. And you cannot have one without the other. Nature is both. So we are both. You can, if you deny it, you're just in denial, because we see it in nature. Just because the tiger hunts a gazelle and eats it, does that make that tiger evil or dark magic? No, it doesn't. It's survival. And that's the same thing that goes with almost everything, is that you have to have both. There is a balance. And that's the obsession too with a lot of Judeo-Christian beliefs, is that, it's this ever-ending battle between light and dark.
Yep.
But if they just stop to realize that those opposites, those polar opposites, they're opposites of the universe. They're undeniable binary opposites of the universe, as above and so below, as within, as without. That dark, the sun, the moon, you have to have those. They exist that way, because if they didn't, it wouldn't work.
Thrown out of balance.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting that you brought up, like, the animal medicine, because to me, that's where you really see it. Like, you can't blame the tiger for following its nature. And, I have a really demonized animal that I work with in healing work, which is vulture. And,
I love vulture.
Yeah, I mean, vulture picks out, like, it's the cleaner, and it doesn't ever kill anything. But you cannot ignore the fact that vulture relies on something else to do the killing for it. You know what I mean? Like, that's part of its medicine, is that it has to wait. It has to be patient. It has to sneak in behind someone else's, like, doing the dirty work, so to speak. But it's so helpful for healers, because that's basically what we're due. Like, people get all effed up on their energy field, or get hurt, or get psychically attacked, and we come in and eat that out. We come and pull that stuff out. Like, somebody's already done the damaging work here, and now I'm going to clean it up. Now I'm going to make it cleansed. So it works for healers, but then outside we have to contend with all the shadow of what we're doing. And so it's just valuable. I think using animals and animal medicine is really valuable to show that, because with humans, we put too much emphasis on free will and choice, and we don't think of ourselves as animals. So when people act out of their own self-interest or protection or do that kind of work, we blame them as like it's a moral failing instead of like, no, that's a human trying to survive. That's literally a human activated in its animal instincts, you know?
Yeah. And we are animals, and we forget that we're mammals. We are animals. We're human beings, of course, but yeah, that is a part of us. And that's why I loved your work so much, is because the emphasis on that animal medicine. And I think more people need to see that, how much nature reflects our path, and we can learn from them as literal wild animals, or we can learn from them as like metaphors for other things. Yeah.
I know, you know, one of the things that was like a big mind blower for me, and I think that was like the step for me to start calling myself a witch, was Sharon Muzio said, hey, do you want to do Timothy Roderick's Wicca a year and a day? And it was like every day it's like teaching you a Wiccan path. And she'd already been like very familiar with this. And I wanted to know more about Wicca because it's such a new religion. And I just kind of wanted to know, where does this stuff come from? Because people say crazy Wiccan stuff in my circles. I'm like, I want to know where that comes from. Anyway, I started doing, I did not get very far, but one of the things he says is shamans are witches. Like it's the same path. Shamanic studies is the same path as witchery and witch studies. It's basically the same thing. And I was like, of course it is. Of course it is. Because we're using all the same medicine. We're using the energy of the earth. We're taking, we're alchemizing things. We're changing things. And that's what shamanic work does. That's what shamanic studies do. And that's what witches do too. So it was like a mind blower for me. I was like, oh, I guess I can call myself this.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like you can declare yourself as that, as if you feel drawn to it. Yeah. But what you said there about the shamanic practitioner and witchcraft, and really there's hundreds of names. Like we can call them magicians, we can call them medicine keepers, we can call them healers, like we can call them so many occultists even. You can call what we do so many different things, and people get so hung up on the words and what they mean. But it is really the same path, just a different word, and maybe from a different origin, of course. Like there are different origins and using words, and a lot of people don't like the word witch at all, which is fine. But it is the same path. It's the same path. It's just a different way of getting there.
And my teacher said something to me last time I talked to her, was like basically like, oh, I'm not sure I'm using shamanic anymore. And I was like, okay. I don't know what to do with that, because it's such an easy word to use. But her point was, hey, we shouldn't appropriate anything. Like it, using shaman is delineating people from Mongolia, which we aren't.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, it did originate in China. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we need to be really mindful if we're really going to say, I'm not cultural appropriating. We're not appropriating anything. So you can just call it transformative work. And I was like, okay. I still use it as a shorthand, but I'm more mindful. I usually clarify it now. I'm using shamanic, but I'm trying to be mindful that that's culturally appropriated from Mongolian shamanic tradition, which I do not practice. So I kind of like, it gets complicated, but I do want to be a good steward of people's cultures and all of that stuff too, because like you, I tend to pull from a lot of different things. It's hard. So I just have a couple more things, I guess. It's just because you're leading so many people right now and teaching them, like, do you have advice when people are coming out? Like, do you think they need to practice the same kind of protection that you realized you needed? Or what would you give people for advice?
So I really do. I have the intentions of starting my YouTube channel. It is up right now, but there are really no videos. I think there might be one old TikTok that I threw up there, but I want to focus some more time and energy on making videos for there so they can be longer, because I only have 15 to 60 seconds with TikTok or Instagram. So, but this is a great question, and I do want to cover it in a series, but I think everyone's starting out, the basics, no matter what path you're choosing, whether you're calling yourself a witch or pagan or not, whenever you're starting a spiritual journey, you need to learn the basics. And the basics are, I would say, these three things. First one is meditation. That doesn't mean you have to get your mind completely clear, but you have to understand your own energy field and your own energy before you try to manipulate anything else, because that is what magic is. It's manipulating energy for a result. And if you don't know how to do that with your own body, then you can't really get anywhere.
100%
So
agree.
right, but it doesn't mean you have to be totally zen, wiped mind. It could be walking meditation. It could be guided meditation. That's number one. Number two, protection. After you learn your energy field, protection, you need to learn the basics of protection and what that means. And there's so many ways to do protection, but basically understanding, how you are affected by the outside world. So like if you are more empathetic than others, you need to start learning how to ward and shield your energy field, ward and shield your home, doing protection spells and things like that. And then the third one is connecting with nature. Even if you hate going outside and you don't like being outside, doesn't matter, because the natural world is what we are drawing from. So if you don't spend time with it, you're not going to have a relationship where it's going to help you in your work. So taking a walk, sitting under a tree, watching a babbling brook, like those are all magical moments that then sometimes can bring you so much inspiration and connect you with, the earth, your ancestors, the spirit guides, whatever it is you're trying to connect with. It just gives you a different understanding of the world around you. So those are the three things I always recommend before I give book advice or I give, what your first spells should be. I think those three core things are the most important.
Oh my gosh, I love that you just said all those three things, because it's really like know thyself, right?
Yes.
Well, I love the work you're doing.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Centered with me, Angie Yingst. If you'd like to send me a question or comment about this show or any shows, you can send them to Angie@themoonandstone.com.